left off last time, I was talking about Immanuel Kant. And I said he has a huge influence on what comes after him. Because what he's doing is those two divergent threads, the continental rationalisms are like Team Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz. Everything's really a matter of mind. And then the team empiricism, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, everything comes to us primarily through our senses. He's synthesizing those two things, where he ends up saying, you're both right, just depends on how you look at it. In what way? Well, remember, Hume was saying things like, well, how can we trust our senses? We know like cause and effect is impossible. Like, it doesn't really, we don't see any cause and effect. We just make these like generalizations about stuff happening. And Kant says, yeah, we do that because it makes sense to us, at least to us. We don't know, is that actually true out in the world? Who can say? But it's at least true in our everyday experience, because of the way our minds do stuff. So Kant says our minds actually put together the world. Now, that is not to say there's not something outside us. Okay, so like outside your own body right now, like even this room, what is this room like? We don't know. We know what the room is like to us. It looks this big. Things in here have these colors. It smells funny in here. Today, surprisingly, the temperature in here today is surprisingly okay in the room. Usually it's maybe it's a little too hot. Okay, it's usually off, all right? But you having this experience, is the room that way, or is it that way to you? It's that way to you. And you're like, no, it's that way even if I weren't in it. How do you know? Because your only experience about it is with you in it, or other human beings in it. We don't know what the outside world is actually like. Outside of your own body, you don't know what the world is like. Even your own body. It's just sensations that you have. Remember Hume said we're just bundles of perceptions? So Kant says, what's the world really like? What is actual truth outside ourselves? We have no way of knowing. We just know how the world appears to us. Okay? That's all we've got. And so, Kant also has this division between what he calls the noumenal and the phenomenal. Sometimes just noumena without the L's, noumena, phenomena. And in German, sometimes this is called the Ding on sich. Okay, remember, Kant says our mind works through a particular process that I described last time. It's called the transcendental process. Sometimes it's called the transcendental dialectic, where our mind, first thing our mind does is it builds space and time. So what's going on is your senses, your eyeballs, your ear holes, your nose hole, your senses are just taking in data. They're just taking raw data from the outside world. And then what they do is once that data gets translated through your nervous system into your brain, into your mind produces an experience that you have. Like right now, this is happening live. Okay, stuff is coming in through your senses, and it's coming together in an experience that you have right now that's happening inside your head. Well, we talked about this before, stuff like this. Like you're seeing right now. Your eyeballs are not windows to the outside. That's not how eyeballs work. We know this today. Okay, they don't just like it's not like light is shining into your brain. Okay, like a projector. No. Light comes into your eyeballs, hits the rods and cones in the back of your eyeballs, and that information gets processed. That signal goes through the optic nerve to the brain, but then somehow, somewhere, it's not just that signal goes to the brain, you're having an experience. You're seeing stuff now. Because your mind's putting it together. Kant says, yeah. But even before that, your mind builds space and time. It has to render it. I compare this to the way like a video game might take the data on a disk and compiles it together and renders it on your television. Okay? You're watching it in 4K. Okay? Or whatever. It renders it appropriately to whatever you're on. Your mind does that too. I wish it could do more upscaling, but it can't. But it processes it and puts it together. First thing your mind does is it renders space and time. Okay, that's the transcendental aesthetic. Then it does the transcendental analytic, where it renders things in a particular way, where it incorporates quantity, quality, relation, modality. And then the final step, transcendental unity of the apperception. This all happens in a contigenous experience. There's no lag. Can you imagine that if there was lag in real life? That'd be terrible. Like if someone's talking and then like the sound would come later. No, we have all your senses are working together at the same time. Now that's sometimes like if you're in like the Grand Canyon, hello. Yeah, there's the way sound works there. But for the most part, we have a live, contiguous experience. That's how our minds work. But as our minds doing the work, it's not like that's the way the world is outside us. Does space and time exist outside us? We don't know. Because we only have what our minds are putting together. So it's hard to say what the world is like without us in it, because we really only have our experience. So even when we're doing stuff like science, remember Hume was critical of science, like you can't say this is truth. And Kant says, yeah, you're right. We can't say this stuff is true in the real world. But you know what? At least in terms of what we see, we can say this works. So we're doing science. Science works. Now, is it true with a capital T? Knock it off. Stop trying to say stuff like that. Science is not about truth, despite what Neil deGrasse Tyson may say. He tweeted something about science this weekend. Science is true whether you like it or not. Science isn't about truth. Science is about generalized instances that you can then make predictions about. That's what science is about, if I can put it as rudimentarily as possible. Can you make predictions based on generalizations? If you can, it's science. If you can't, it's magic. Okay, and good intentions, maybe. But this is why Kant says, okay, noumenal phenomenon. What does that mean? Phenomenal, that's the world as we experience it. So when we're doing things like science, we're talking about phenomena, what we experience. What's noumena then? Literally, that comes from the Greek word pneuma, which means spirit. Stuff that is the world as it is in itself. Do we know anything about that? That's what even this German phrase, Ding an sich, thing in itself. Do we know what the world is like in itself? Nope. Okay, so I'm seeing the table. I can see it. I can feel, it's solid. I can say, but really all I have is my own experience about it. I've got, like Hume said, I've got my perceptions about it. I've got what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, all those things. I've got that. What's the table really like? I don't know. Because all I've got is my senses about it. And not just about the table, about everything in the universe. What's the sun like? Okay, what are clouds like? What color is the sky? What's the sky look like? Well, it was blue. Now someone might object. No, it's blue, whether or not I say it is or not. Science is just true. It's blue because of the way our eyeballs work. If you didn't have eyeballs, the sky wouldn't be blue, and it's only blue part of the day anyway. Right? It has to do with the way light scatters in the atmosphere anyway, like why that works. Like we know that, but it works that way for us because we have eyeballs. There are other creatures that don't have eyeballs. Is the sky not blue for that? No, it's blue no matter what. Sure, we can talk about the phenomenon happening outside ourselves, but even there we're measuring that, like the way photons disperse in the atmosphere. We can describe that stuff, but even there, even with our scientific instruments, what we're doing is those are just extensions of what we're already sensing anyway. It's still a matter of us, our minds interpreting reality kind of on automatic for us. Like with the way that cube worked. It says there's things that we can render in our mind without us being conscious about it. But we tend to think the way I'm seeing the world, that's what it is. And Kant says, nope, our minds kind of build it for us. Now for Plato, where was reality? And then the empirist, and you could even say that, there's a sense in which Descartes said, where's reality? It's the mind getting it right out there. The empiricists, generally, even going back to Aristotle, but also including the British empiricists, where do we get truth? It's out there. The reality's out there. What's Kant saying? Where's reality? It's in here. Now, not that you're remembering it like for Plato, but your mind builds the world. There's the world out there. There's reality. But we don't know what that's like. Our mind kind of puts it together for us. Now, Kant has had a huge influence. So when we're talking about things like, I think I said this before, things like even, and this is not what Kant was intending, but where this goes is stuff like social constructs. Are they real? And people go, well, no, they're not real. They have no ontology. They have no being. But they can still be existentially real. They're real to us, even if they're not a real, substance in themselves. whatever it may be. But there's some stuff that we just can't know, and so what Kant includes there in the noumena, stuff that we can't know because it's not science, like the world, like what's God like? And Kant believes in God. Kant tries to be a Lutheran. And I think he means well by it. But stuff like God, the soul, free will, he says you can't. There's no way that your senses can put that stuff together. You're never going to get it right. So stop talking about it as if it's science. Call that religion. Okay? What you do on Sundays or whatever day of the week you worship, that stuff's fine. That's not wrong by any means. Don't call it science. Stop wasting your time. Well, can we prove the existence of God? No. In fact, there's a little book he has called The Only Possible Argument for the Existence of God. And in there he talks about stuff like Anselm and the arguments for the existence of God that we've seen. He says, well, sometimes they sound good, and then arguments against the existence of God sound good. Why? Because as soon as you start talking about noumena, stuff outside your experience, our minds can't process that stuff right. Which is why sometimes religion sounds good and sometimes it doesn't. Because we can't talk about that stuff in a scientific manner. Like we can talk about the study of religion, sure. But when we start talking about religion or religious beliefs, stuff like the existence of God and the existence of the soul, our minds can't compute it, so stop talking about it as if it's science. And keep in mind, the Middle Ages, I mean, before Kant, theology was something you would study alongside anything else. If you wanted to study medicine, you're going to have to probably get a degree in theology first. Today, do you need to do that? No. Although we still wear the same robes. Those graduation robes, if you notice, they look like choir robes. Exactly, because they're church robes. It's the same robes. All right, you could be going to the most secular school in the country. Same robes. Church robes. Why? Because the caps have been downgraded. They used to be those big fluffy caps, and they're turned into just pieces of cardboard that don't fit very well. Okay. All right, so this is Kant's view. Now, Kant, I don't want to get into it here, but Kant also says the same thing in Ethics too. So just like he had the Kritik den reinen Vernunft, he has this book called Kritik der praktischen Vernunft, which is the critique of practical reason, where he says, okay, just like there was stuff in geometry that you know without knowing that you know it, your mind does the same thing with ethics too. Like that's how you know stuff like murder is wrong, even if it hasn't been proven to you. There's stuff that you just know, but you don't know how you know it. It's also synthetic a priori. Okay, so that's why you're like, murder's wrong. Can't explain it to you, and it's not. In Kant says it's not reducible to, well, God said in Exodus 20, thou shalt not. No, you know it even if you haven't read that. Like there's stuff that you just intuit because it's also synthetic a priori as well. He has a third book where he says there's other things, like we know when something's beautiful, we know when something's sublime. Now, granted, there's a word we don't use very often, and that's the sublime is where you're like, whoa, with something in nature. Like if you ever looked at a mountain or like a beautiful sunset or something, you're like, wow. It's not that it's beautiful, it's a different feeling of like, whoa. That's the feeling of the sublime. We probably say it's pretty. But then, and if you've ever taken like a picture of a sunset, you're like, that's beautiful, let me take a picture, and then the picture does not do it justice. That's the feeling of the sublime. Okay, we throw that word, it's sublime. We throw that word around, but Kant says, that's something that we just know it when we see it. That's in his Kritik der Urteilschaft. You look. I can see you squirming.
The question I have with I lost the damn thought. I was listening to you talk. I call that phrase "all" rather than sublime. Sort of the same kind of thing.
Yes. No. I think in English that's fair. The feeling of like all, like whoa.
Yeah.
Like the old, like this word in English. It means something different now, but it used to mean full of awe. Like, wow. And for whatever reason now it means like nasty. Why did that happen? English is weird, man. Awe works there too, explaining the feeling of a sublime. But you kind of know it. You just know it when you see it. But like to describe it, like what is it? Well, like I did that thing where I'm like, when you see something, but then you like take a picture of it, it like doesn't do it justice. But you're like, it's the same lighting and everything, like it's the same, like here's a picture of it, but it just doesn't feel the same. That feeling is something that Kant says, that's your mind putting it together for you. The main thing I want to stress here is Kant says our minds are putting reality together for us, and the stuff that then our minds put together we can talk about, that's phenomena. So when we're talking about when we're doing science, we're talking about the world as it appears to us. Okay, phenomena. Noumena, that's off limits. You can talk about it, but you'll start sounding real stupid. And it can't be signed. Well, the soul exists. That's noumena. Yeah, you can talk about it, that's fine. But talk about it in church. Don't talk about it in the lab. Because you're not going to find this stuff in the lab. Says Kant. You're not going to find the Ding on sich. Okay. That's Kant. Now, what happens is, this is going to stick around for a while. We still do this. We're all kind of Kantians today, whether we realize it or not. I'm not going to think of a bunch of people that would object to me saying that. But Kant has had a bigger influence than you probably realize. Okay? For a couple reasons. One, that whole what's noumena, what's phenomena, we still do that. And two, remember his original question was a transcendental question. So remember, he started with how are synthetic a priori judgments possible? Like, how is this possible? What are the conditions that led to this? That's what he's doing. And remember, all his books are called Kritik den reinen Vernunft. Kritik der praktischen Vernunft. Kritik der Urteilschaft. So asking transcendental questions in German is called Kritik, which in English would be critique. So what happens with Kant is we have the start here of critique. So critical theory of any kind is a kind of analysis that says, what are the conditions that how did this get like this in the first place? And that kind of transcendental question, that's critique. It starts with Kant. As opposed to just saying, this is what the world's like. It's how did it get like, what are the institutions in place, what are the ideas in place to make this work the way it does, whatever it is. There's what's called biblical criticism that starts in the 19th century too, that's not saying, oh, the Bible's bad. No, it's, how did these books get written? What are the conditions that made this author write, say, the book of Genesis? Okay, there wasn't one author. It looks like, actually, if we analyze it the way this stuff is here, it looks like maybe multiple authors wrote this thing. So if you've ever been even in an English class where you're like, what motivated the author to write this work, and you're doing that analytical stuff, you're doing criticism, literary criticism. It doesn't mean, literary criticism does not mean this writing is bad, because that's the way we use the word critical or criticism a lot of the time. It just means analyzing, how did this come to be? But that kind of thinking starts with Kant here. This is called criticism or critique. It also, we're going to see how it plays out in 19th century German philosophy as well, because the rest of the thinkers I'm going to talk about in Germany are going to talk about the notion of critique, and they're going to talk about it in different ways. But I've given you some English examples. Let's look at our next thinker. Georg, I'm going to abbreviate it, Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Now, there are some individuals I could put in between Kant and Hegel as well. Fichte, Schelling, but this is an introductory class. So that's been true all semester long. If you zoom in, there's actually a lot more going on in between. So we're just looking at like the crests of the waves, so to speak. Which Hegel would like that. So what does Hegel say? First of all, he's totally on Team Kant here. Yeah, like this stuff is great. Noumena, phenomena, transcendental. But what he doesn't like about Kant only apply this to like synthetic a priori stuff about like geometry. Like, how do we know triangles work? That stuff's great and all, but like we could do more with this. For example, Hegel says, look at how our minds conceive of something like Geschichte. Was bedeutet Geschichte? What is history? So something like this. So now history, you might think, oh great, more social studies. How does history work? Now, he doesn't just mean like, how does time work? Consider, do we know history? Is it something we have access to? I think I asked early on in the semester, did George Washington exist? And if he did, how do we know it? Well, we have writings. Wikipedia says so. Okay, but we don't have like the same kind of access to it as we do to our own memory. Okay, and even there, notice we talk about history in the singular. If you go back in time a couple of centuries, you would find like a history of Germany, or a history of France, or a history of this people. And all of a sudden we get to this point where now we have history, one, like in the singular. We talk about history, not histories. How did that come to be? Well, because history is kind of an idea. Where does history happen, says Hegel? Whoop. This is why, consider how many times we have arguments about the meaning of history. Now, I don't mean the facts. Okay, so we can talk about facts, like, okay, when did the signers of the Declaration of Independence sign the Declaration of Independence? July 4th, 1776. That's indisputable, right? We got evidence of that. But if I say, what did it mean? And there's a whole can of stuff that opens up. This is why stuff like, I love asking this softball question, especially in this part of the country. Why did this American Civil War happen? What was the cause of the American Civil War? Now, I'll go ahead and say, if you say anything other than slavery, you're wrong. Well, it's for states' rights. Yeah, states' rights to keep slaves. Okay, sure, you can do that. But why? Well, no. It's the war between the states. Okay, it was people, fighting for their home. Why so many variances of opinion? And especially heated ones. Because history is not out there. It's in here. And it's something that's taught. We interpret, just like Kant said, we interpret reality around us. We also do that with narratives or stories as well. That's Hegel's point. And this is how all our ideas evolve. And in fact, they do evolve. And in fact, they evolve through something he calls the transcendental dialectic, but it's the Hegel version. So all our ideas, all our concepts, are something that gets built up over time through a dialectical process. A process that looks like this. You got being, you got a thing. And then you have non-being, some other thing that's not that. And that produces becoming. Something in between being and unbeing. So if you say all right, I'm trying to be a graduate from the school, but you're not yet. But you're in the process of becoming. So becoming something means you're somewhere between actually being it and not. Okay, this is called the dialectic. So I'm going to give you some examples. Now, if you Google stuff about Hegel, it'll probably use these terms. He didn't use these terms. Another German philosopher named Schelling did. Well, this is really popular, so I'm going to put it up here. Thesis, antithesis, produces a synthesis. Okay, so these terms, Hegel didn't use these terms, but they get used a lot. So I'm going to put them up there for you, just so in case you see it. And what this stuff means, now, also people reduce this to two things. So this just means stuff comes together, other stuff comes together, and it makes new stuff. How did you get here? What's your efficient cost? Like, obviously, you have parents, okay, and there's some kind of this dialectic going on here. Here's how you got here. Two gametes came together at some point. But also consider, really everything works this way. They're coming together of two different things. They need not be opposites, because it can kind of look that way when you're just being something, the opposite of non-being. It just means two different things coming together. But consider, everything builds this way. I mentioned earlier about how ridiculous English is, right? English, the English language. Has anyone ever read Beowulf before? Okay, I said it's the first thing written in English. Here's the first word. What? First word of Beowulf. Does that look like English to you? Now, if you start opening up Beowulf, you'll go, this does not look like English. This doesn't look like English to me. Why? Because it's a different language. It's Old English. I know sometimes we'll say Old English when people are talking about these and thous. That's the same language we're speaking now. That's not Old English. That's early modern English. We're speaking modern English now. What happened? How did English go from being what to what it is? How did it change? Through this process. Dialectic. Okay, what happened? Well, people were thinking that this old school ridiculous Beowulf stuff, and then in 1066 the French invaded. Okay? Or the Normans. The Normans who spoke French. Okay? Pourquoi? Well, they were there, and so what happened is in English, French and Old English started merging together. That's how English gets created. I'm oversimplifying quite a bit. But that's also why we have, English especially has a bunch of different words for the same stuff. Okay, because, so the rich French overlords, what are they doing? They're eating inside because they rule. What are the Anglo-Saxons doing? They're outside working because they've been conquered. So that's why we have words like, we have words for a food and an animal, and all the words for the food come from French, but all the words from the animal come from Old English. So stuff like, what's the animal that says moo? Cow, okay, cow. But what do you call the meat from a cow when you're eating it? Beef, right? French, beef. Okay, it's a chicken. Hähnchen from the German, but it's poultry when you're eating the food. You can talk about what's pig or hog or swine, but it's pork. So we got all these fancy, what does that come from? Dialectic. So our English is weird about that. We have all these different words for all kinds of things coming from both. So we have many words for the same thing in English. Why? Because it's messed up. But it's that. But not just English, other languages. All the Romantic languages. By that I mean those that descend from Latin. They're not just Latin. They're Latin mixed with something else. So Spanish is Latin mixed with Visigothic. Italian, which is very close, is Latin mixed with Ostrogothic. That's why Italian and Spanish are similar, not the same, but similar. Like I said, in Spanish, ¿cómo estás? How are you doing? In Italian, ¿cómo está? Close, not the same. Latin, quid agis. A bit different, but they're both descended. French is descended from the same thing, it just has ridiculous pronunciation. If you look at French on paper, it looks kind of similar to Spanish, if you're just looking at the words. But its pronunciation is different. Because it has its own trajectory and ancestry too. So languages all come together, they're these different building together over time. What's Hegel saying? Everything evolves. Everything, I'm just mentioning languages. Our ideas evolve. Christianity has evolved. All right, why? By coming into contact with other things. How do we evolve? You're evolving right now. The words that I'm saying right now are affecting you. And it might be affecting you in a whole bunch of ways. It might be like, I find this really interesting. It might be, I find this boring as hell. Whatever it is, it's affecting you, interacting, making you who you are. And that's how everything works, says Hegel. Everything is this dialectical process. Everything kind of coming into contact and friction with each other. And that's how the universe works. This is how the universe works. Everything works by way of this process. Things coming together, this thing called the dialectic, causing interaction. And for him, this is almost like a wheel turning. Like this, what becoming now becomes like a new being, which starts interacting with new stuff, which then produces a new becoming, which then becomes its own kind of being, and so on, for all eternity. So it's like, you can almost think of it like a wheel that's turning, and history is moving. To where? That way. To something he calls the absolute. What's that look like? That ultimate humanity. We're going to a way where everything has reached its terminus in terms of evolution. We'll be perfect human beings. So, the United Federation of Planets. Okay, no poverty, no war, we'll know everything. All the diseases will be cured. Kind of looks like heaven a little bit. Yeah, but it's the result of history. Is there a Christian influence here? Absolutely. Is it Christianity? No. And this comes across in even liberal discourse. We need to get to a point where we're beyond this problem, whatever it is. We'll get there if we do these things. Have you ever heard the expression, the right side of history? Here's the wave. This is Hegelian. We're going there. Okay, history's going there whether you want it to or not. This thing's moving. Okay, history is in motion. History is not something that you just study about. This thing happened in the past. History is moving. What's directing it? This stuff called Geist, which means in English spirit. It's related to our word ghost. That's why if you read King James Bible, the Holy Ghost. Whoa, that's creepy. Why is there a ghost there? It's just a word for spirit in German. So this thing called Geist. What is Geist? collective human consciousness. There's almost a sense in which all our minds are a team together. There's a human consciousness corporately. Not just your mind and your mind and your mind. Collectively. That's why we can say stuff like, in the 1960s, we landed on the moon. Did you? Did me? Did I? Did you? Did you? None of us were there, but we can say things like, we landed. Who's the we here? Humanity. So we use that kind of language that's inclusive in that way because we talk about humanity as if we're all on the same team, because we are. And Hegel says that we are. We're all on the same team. Collectively humanity. So our collective consciousness is what's propelling this forward to the absolute. Where we'll get to one place where we're all on the same team and everything's great. But it's a work in progress. But it started out with us being really idiotic and stupid. Now that's also, Hegel says, we can rewind this and look back at history and see how things work. And that's also part of critique. We can look back, we can look at this. Critique is looking backwards. How did history come to be? What are the conditions that made this thing happen in the past? So stuff like, in history you might learn, like, what made the Renaissance happen? Well, a lot of nobles died in medieval wars and capital started to... What we're doing right there, that's critique. Historical criticism, what made that happen? But we also do it in science. Why is this layer here in the rocks? What are the conditions that would have made that possible? Okay, Cambrian explosion, there's a lot of living... And this right here, what made this happen? Well, because there was some kind of... When we do this stuff in science where we look back and we say, we see this phenomenon, what would have made that possible? And then we extrapolate from that. We say, these are the conditions. That's how we can say things like, how do we get to conclusions like the Earth is 4.5 billion years old? We can't go back that far in time. We already talked about that. We don't. How do we know? It's just a theory. Well, because of this. We can kind of rewind. What are the conditions that would have made this possible? We see this phenomenon in the fossil record. How did that get there? And we can say, well, this would have had to have happened for this thing to occur. And that's what scientists are doing. That's why we have, what made all these rock layers? Different ages of the Earth. Different things happening at different times. That's why we can, well, how do we know there was a meteor? Here's a layer of ash that was in the atmosphere at the time. We can do that kind of stuff. Even though we can't go back in time. Bye, dinosaurs. That's how we can do that. Because of this. So Hegel is saying here, everything evolves and everything is subject to this kind of dialectical analysis. But where is this stuff happening? Here. Now it's not to say that, oh, wait a minute. Are you saying all the stuff about science that you just talked about, are you saying those things aren't real? Well, they are. But say, let's talk about those T-Rexes again. The T-Rex living going, you know what? I am a Cretaceous dinosaur living... No, those are human terms to describe things. Right? There even, like those terms that we use. Those are human labels that we put onto things. Okay, kind of like how, like in a cartoon, like, in the middle, you look at a map, you will be in South Carolina or Georgia, like everything's labeled, right? I live in Augusta. So when I cross the Savannah River, it's not like I look down the river, it doesn't say Savannah River, like letters in the water, right? Or South Carolina. Like there might be a sign that says that. But like reality itself, those borders we impose onto reality, they're not really there. Same kind of thing, like stuff like scientific labels, the Cretaceous, the Mesozoic, okay, the Hadean. All these, they're not really out there. They're labels that we kind of fling onto things because we're the ones constructing reality. It's there. If the noumenon's there, the phenomena is basically how we label things that are out there. If you want to know more about Hegel, someone that was an expert in Hegel, Martin Luther King. So, in fact, if you go to the King archives, he's a brilliant Hegelian thinker because what is something like he says, what is, he would say, in this country, what is it, African American? Dialectical? Together. And so there's a tension there, and even something like Gandhi's ahimsa and satyagraha. Okay, nonviolence. What is that? There's the status quo, nonviolent resistance, coming together to produce a new result. Okay? Which is going to be the end of segregation. That's going to come something new. But then, it doesn't just stop there. There's more stuff that needs to be done. But that's something where Hegel, not talked about a lot, but very much in application to this day, including in critical theory today. Arthur Schopenhauer. So I'm going to say just a little bit about Schopenhauer, so that's someone I'm going to talk about later, very important. So Schopenhauer says, okay, Kant's great. Hegel's an idiot, but Kant's great because he's right. This noumenal stuff, we shouldn't really talk about it as if it's science. But having read some of that Indian philosophy, like the Vedas, which Schopenhauer loves, he really likes stuff from India, and Buddha, he says, here's the deal. What we can say here, phenomena we should totally study, and that's science. But we can say, what motivates, what is the noumena? And he's saying, this isn't science, but it's philosophically, what do we see going on? And really, what we see behind all of reality is this thing he calls the will. And reality is the will. What do I mean by the will there? Well, remember, what did Buddha say? Everything, there's nothing but suffering. Everything's suffering. And why? Because we desire. Well, when he says everything is the will, what Schopenhauer is saying is everything desires. We want. But everything wants. Every living thing exploits. Every living thing. There's other things that living things do. They reproduce. They produce waste. They exploit. What do? Everything consumes energy. How do we do that? We human beings, we eat. And we have choices of what we can eat. We can eat plants. We can eat animals. But basically, we're taking their energy and converting it into something that we can use. Right? Whatever it is, we do it. But every living thing does that. And we all strive. So everything's trying to perpetuate itself. But not just that. Even non-living things are striving. Crystals grow. Crystals aren't alive. But they expand. The universe itself is expanding. So everything, the universe itself kind of wills. Just like we could talk about magnets, they aren't attracted to each other in some sort of sensual sense. Okay? Hey you, South Pole, how you doing? But they are attracted. Nature is motivated in that kind of way. Things just work. Nature itself kind of desires, and this Schopenhauer calls the will. And that's why he says something, he says in the German, Der Mensch kann tun, was will. Kann aber nicht wollen, was will. What does that mean? I don't know German. It means that you can choose what you want to desire. Like you can pick your favorite things. But you can't help the fact that you have things that you want. So you can kind of tune into yourself and go, I choose to like this kind of music. Right? Or I choose to like this kind of food. That's great. You can pick your proclivities. But you can't pick you can't choose the fact that you want things. You just do. And that's something that is at the fundamental aspect of reality. Everything wants. Everything desires. That's all I'm going to say about Schopenhauer. He's great. Right? But that's all I'm going to say about him here for our purposes, so Nietzsche makes more sense. Feuerbach, what does he say? Well, he applies that Hegelian dialectic of sorts, critique to religion. So what he does, remember, Kant was saying, what makes synthetic a priori judgments possible? Okay, Hegel says history works in a certain way. Feuerbach says, now wait just a minute. What are the conditions that made, say, something like Christianity possible, or religion? And what Feuerbach proposes is that religion is something that we made up. Based on looking at the way we know history works now from Hegel. It's something we made up, where it started out with, like, in almost every religion, says Feuerbach, what is God presented as? Abba. Father. This is father figure. So we can, using that dialectical method, we can extrapolate, if we zoom back, what probably happened? People originally worshiped their ancestors, their father figures, their ancestors, and over time it just evolved into this concept of like the cosmic father. Okay, even something like the word Jupiter. Okay, Eov Pater. It means sky father. Okay, big beard, dad, cosmic dad. So if we zoom back in time, that's really probably where, that's why almost all these religions have this concept of the pater, all right, the father. Like, the ancient world is just saturated in it. Okay, this concept of the fatherness. Okay, so, and that explains religion. Now, and Feuerbach does this not because he hates religion, right, or he hates Christianity. Like, does he think Christianity is true? No, but it's a feature of, really, he looks at religion as, it's kind of a cultural technology, something that evolved, that helps communities cohere, that has come together. So we've got one unified set of ideas that helps us as a civilization. Whereas if there were no religion in history, there would have been a lot of divergent opinions. People would have come into more conflict with each other. So it kind of functions as a, this is not something that Feuerbach said, but Sloterdijk. But it kind of is like, religion works as kind of an immune system for a culture or a society. Like, everybody has the same ideas. If someone says, wait a minute, I don't think this. Well, stop. You're out. Okay, we're this community. If you start allowing for divergent ideas, it ends up being chaotic, and the society together can't function. And Feuerbach just says this is a matter of analysis. Like, this is what happened. And so God's made up, and God is really, and he says maybe even there is something out there that's a God that exists. Maybe it does, but it's not our human invention of it. The God that we have is something, again, like Kant said, it's something we have here. Maybe there is a being out there that you could call God. But what we have in our concept of God is that all the human ideals perfected. So, like, I love, but I wish I could love better. God's all loving. I know some stuff, but I wish I could know better. God's all knowing. I wish I could only be so many places at once. God's all places at once. He's omnipresent. That's what we're doing. We're taking our human ideals and basically throwing them out onto a concept that exists, is out there, but it's really in here. Supposedly, according to Genesis, it says God made man in his own image, but Feuerbach says, really, we have made God in our own image. Again, maybe there's some being out there. He's not dismissing that. But really, and he says this is the problem with religion, Christianity in particular, but others too. And this is why Feuerbach is a materialist, which is the belief that there's only matter. There is no such thing as spirit. So this makes him different from Hegel. So even like that Geist thing moving history forward, really though? No, history moves forward. Feuerbach doesn't disagree with that. But who's moving history forward? We are. People. There's not like some ghost or spirit. And also things like spirits don't exist because we don't see them. All right, so he tries to, like, that's what materialism is. There's only matter. But the problem is, with the whole spiritualism thing, is what people do is stuff like they ignore things here because of the promises of religion. Like, we have problems right now. Oh, that's okay. Because one day you'll be in heaven with Jesus. Stop whining. Okay. And Feuerbach says that this is the problem with religion. Not always, but a problem is that sometimes this kind of stuff happens. Where we have real problems here and now that people will ignore because of the prospect of some spiritual future that doesn't exist. Okay, so people will ignore problems. Now, he's not saying every religious person says that, but that it's something that happens. Okay, so he's not hating. He's not like a modern Richard Dawkins or that kind of atheism today. Okay, where it's just a complete, oh no, religious people are stupid. No, it's a process of evolution. But the problem that it presents is precisely that it causes people to ignore problems of today because, listen, one day, oh, you're sick now? Well, don't worry, one day you'll have a perfected body, a resurrected body. So stop whining now. Yeah, you're working hard right now, 80 hours a week. But you know, one day you'll have that great Sabbath rest on the other side of the Jordan River. Okay, because heaven's going to be awesome. But you're not in heaven yet, so get back to work. And this causes human beings to exploit one another, says Feuerbach. And this is really going to influence our next thinker, Karl Marx. But here's what Marx is doing. Because I don't think it often gets explained this way. Marx himself, remember Plato was a synthesizer? He was taking Heraclitus' ideas, everything changes. Parmenides is taking, nothing changes, puts them together. In the Middle Ages, they were doing that dialectic too. Remember, they were taking their religion and they were taking Aristotle and they were trying to synthesize that together. What Marx does is he synthesizes Hegel with Feuerbach. And this is also, he's also doing critique. In fact, Marx takes critique and runs with it. What is critique? His question is, what are the historical conditions that make this possible now? Our economic conditions. That's why he opens, the Communist Manifesto opens with, after there's a specter haunting Europe. After that, everything here so far is nothing but a history of class struggles. Well, how can you make that analysis? The dialectic of history. If we zoom it, like, why do things exist now? Why do we have the classes that we have now? Why do we have the conflicts we have now? Take a look at history. If we can zoom back on the dialectic and see how these things evolved. Well, how does he get to that point where he's asking that transcendental question? Well, originally, he starts out on Team Hegel, strongly. And there's, in the 19th century, there were what were called old Hegelians and young Hegelians. The old Hegelians were kind of conservative, but they liked Hegel. Yes, the absolute has led to this moment. Yeah, we have reached, like, this is it, we've made it. Aren't we awesome? You see this in Europe at the time, like, we are the greatest culture that has ever lived, right? Germany, we're amazing. Old Hegelians. Young Hegelians, on the other hand, are like, nope, absolute's that way, but now we know what we're after. Let's get there. So before, history was something that we're all just kind of floating along passively, but as humanity has evolved, now we know where we're going. We can say, you know what, hit the accelerator. And that's Marx's whole idea, is that we know where history's going, speed it up. And so he takes this Hegel idea of the dialectic. Okay, and we've got, being, non-being, those things together, you get becoming. But it's not, the problem is, it's not Geist directing it. Feuerbach was right. It's not Geist directing it. What is the fuel that propels it forward? For Hegel, it was this idea of spirit or consciousness. What is it that makes it go forward? Human beings. Nothing happens without us. People, and probably people you haven't heard of. Because Marx says this, often when we're talking about history, we reduce it to individuals. Well, General so-and-so won this battle. Yeah, him and his army of nameless people that you don't know. Who lives in the White House? The president. Who built the White House? Name one person. Can you? The answer is slaves. And Marx is going, exactly. Like, we tend to reduce things in history to these moments. Like when we're talking about battles. When we talk about the history of the United States, you probably studied a bunch of presidents. And probably not the people who worked with their blood, sweat, and tears to build this country. Right, just an American, well, there was the Washington administration, and then Adams, and then Jefferson. Now, I'm not saying those things aren't important, and neither is Marx. But we have a tendency to reduce things to just individuals. Like did Elon Musk build a Tesla? No. In fact, he came very late to that game. Okay, you think he started up, he did not start, he bought it late into the game. Okay, something like, did Bill Gates, did he do all the work for Microsoft? Is Jeff Bezos working at an Amazon fulfillment center? Is he filling up your packages? No, but we talk like Bezos is Amazon. What about the workers pissing in bottles? The point is that we have a tendency to talk about like the individual, like CEOs and presidents, as though that's what happens, when really, Marx says what's really making things go is the people. The people that you've never heard of. That's what makes history, that's what moves history forward, is the people themselves. And so that causes class relations over time. And Marx says different things have happened throughout history. Like, you go back far enough, there's always a relationship between those that have and those that don't. Have nots. And over time, the distinction between these two, following this, has actually, through this dialectical process, has actually gotten better for those that don't have, over time. So if you go back to the ancient world, you've got, if you go back far enough, human beings are just, they're kind of like animals, hunter-gatherers, that kind of thing. So zooming back, using history to zoom back, once human beings start agriculture, and especially with irrigation, the first technology. We don't need to move around and search for berries anymore. We can stay right here and water our plants. Right there. That's when civilization begins, and that's also when human relationships and hierarchies begin. So you might far enough, like everybody's just one big family, and then once we stop, I'm in charge. By the way, I'm the father. We call this patriarchy. It starts with like a family later. The dad's in charge, right? Woman, children, you work for me. And then once you end up producing, once your irrigation gets more efficient, and you're producing more food, you're no longer the chief, you're the king. Right? You're no longer just the dad, you're the dad for the whole society. That's what a king is. Right? And that you keep going with this. But then what happens is that people that don't have originally, this still sticks around. I'm your father, do what I say no matter what. And then that's kind of what the kings do. I am your, what? King, you do what I say no matter what. In fact, even the word patriotism, that has the word father in there, pater. It literally means fatherism. But then over time, you go from being slaves in the ancient world to being serfs to being working class. Over time, things get better and better, actually. There's more and more, the people that don't have actually over time get more and more. Relatively speaking, in terms of their dignity. In the ancient world, you're a slave, you're nothing. Working, no, I've got my rights. You're still going to exploit me by not giving me overtime, but it's still better than being a slave in the ancient world. Okay, says Marx, but if we keep going, we can predict then, based on this, where things are going, there'll be a time when these distinctions, things are getting better and better and better for the people that don't have. Eventually there's going to get to a point where they don't have, and the haves are indistinguishable. Since we know that's where things are going, let's fast forward a bit. That's what Marx says. So all these notions of what are called Marxist critique, okay, things like advocating for workers' rights and things like that. Like how many, and these things exist, by the way. So stuff like unemployment insurance in the United States. I know people in the United States have a high degree of disdain for Marx in theory. Things like unemployment insurance, the 40-hour work week, the concept of overtime, the concept of laws against child labor, all that comes out of Marx, a Marxist critique. So if we look around and we go, what are the conditions that made, like in the 19th century, kids kept losing their arms working in factories. Maybe we shouldn't have kids working in factories. And the idea of child labor, you're like, oh, that's terrible. That's Marx. We should do more and more to protect working people in general and working people. And we know where it's going. We're going to get to that, kind of like that. It's not the absolute that Hegel talked about because that's spiritual. He's material, like Feuerbach, and this is where he likes the historical method of Hegel. But he says, but there's no spirit. So he's on team Feuerbach in that regard. We make things happen. And we need to make things happen. In fact, he ends a piece called Thesis on Feuerbach, thesis number 11. Says the problem with philosophy is this. Philosophers so far have only described the world. The point is to change it, says Marx. Now, this is a direct quote. Philosophers hitherto have only described the world. The point is to change it. So Plato talking about, yes, the forms work this way. Aristotle, it's all done. Everybody so far has talked about what the world is like, and that's great and all. The point is to do something with that, says Marx. Change the world, and we know where it's going. We know where we're going. Let's embrace that. And since now we've got the reins of history, we can turn things where we want it to go. That's Marx's whole deal. I'm grossly oversimplifying it. But that's Marx's whole deal, this dialectical process. And where we're going. And also I'll just say before I move on, following Feuerbach, his view of religion, I think I need to say this because I hear this often. Religion, Christianity in particular. And he comes from a Jewish family that was forced to convert to Christianity because if they didn't, things would have gone bad. But he says, and you might have heard this expression, there's a couple of little 19th century quotes that pop around. You might have heard the expression, religion is the opiate of the masses. Anyone heard that before? Okay. I find that those old school quotes are known less and less. But he says this, religion is the opiate of the masses. What does that mean? I want to explain this, because those of you who haven't heard it, it's not as loaded with meaning. People will take that out of context to mean, oh, so he means that people that are religious, it's like they're drug addicts. It's like they're junkies. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, okay, all those bad working conditions, it's exactly what Feuerbach was talking about. I have a terrible job. I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm stressed out. Yeah, that's true. That's pretty bad. But if you ask Jesus to help you with that, and then he says that's what religion is used for. Like for all we go through so much. And when he says opiate here, you can really painkiller. We use religion as a painkiller. He's not saying that like it's a bad thing necessarily. He's saying that's just simply making a descriptive claim. That's how we use it. Like life is so bad that we find a refuge in religion because it helps heal the fact of how terrible life is. And so people even say, like, without religion, like, everything would be meaningless. Maybe it would be, but that's what we use it for, says Marx. We use religion because our lives are terrible, but we keep being told, like Feuerbach said, you know what, one day, though, when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. And that's the theme that we keep getting told. Now, it need not be Christianity. It could be Islam in the Islamic world. It could be whatever religion you have in place. But what Marx says is that religion people use as a painkiller for the oppression that we are all going through. And that's how it's used. It's used by, I didn't use this expression yet, the bourgeoisie. I love how we shorten this to like bougie today. That's fantastic. But it's short for bourgeoisie. What is bourgeoisie? Yeah. Literally, bourgeoisie. Okay? Bourg, like from the berg, like an iceberg, literally, those who live in the mountains, or those who live in the castles. The word for berg can mean mountain or castle. It means those who live in the castles. The bourgeoisie. Now why is it? It's a French word for that. But those who live in the castles, they are the ones that use religion to get the working people, like, it's not that they really believe in religion themselves, but they use it to get you to go back to work. Listen, poor people, we need you to work so that we can play. And, yeah, if you get back to work, like, Jesus will love you or something. Like, just get back to work. That's what it's for. At least that's how religion started. For those in power to get those who weren't in power to work. Okay, so why am I saying this? Because Nietzsche's going to say the exact opposite. Marx says those on top, the bourgeoisie, employ religion to get those down below to do what they need to do. Nietzsche's going to say, on the other hand, it's actually those down below that use religion that actually took the people up on high, the real people that should be in power, and they've removed the real people in power, or the real people that should be in power. But so for Marx, you have the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Who's the proletariat? That's the working people. If you've ever read 1984, the proles, that's them. The working people. And see, in the future though, they're all going to be one. There's going to be no bourgeoisie. There's going to be no proletariat. But where we find ourselves right now in history, these people are really trying to hold on to right now because they don't want you to have stuff. All right, and so I'm not trying to pick on it here, but why is a conservative called a conservative? Because they're trying to conserve. But keep. I'm not saying that's necessarily or intrinsically a bad thing. That's not my point. But that's the point of is to conserve the way things are. Whereas say something like progressive is to progress, at least in theory. That's what the terms mean. That's all I'm saying at this point. But so Marx says, bourgeoisie, proletariat, these things are in conflict right now. That's your dialectic, like Hegel said. So here's your being, here's your non-being. As there's a struggle here, as there's a conflict, this will result in something new in the future. What's that going to look like? Something kind of like Hegel's absolute. Maybe. All right. We're out of time. But next time, so Thursday, I'm going to start with Nietzsche.